Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at Nine Mobile. Can we please clap? Steering the company's strategy across digital platforms, business models, and technologies. Prior to this, he led the digital transformation strategy at ARM Holding Company and has held pivotal roles at InterSwitch Group, where he pioneered customer-centric payments and e-commerce solutions across Africa. Ina is also on the advisory board of the FinTech Center at the University of East London and serves as RDSBL Industrial Fellow at the Royal Dutch School of Business and Law. Armed with an executive master's in digital transformation and innovation leadership from IE Business School, he continues to drive innovation and elevate tech ecosystems across the continent.
Before I start, I wanted to, Franklin is not in the room, but I want to let him know that I have a serious problem with him, and I'll tell you why. First of all, he didn't tell me that I was coming for a very powerful sermon, and he didn't tell me that a very powerful pastor in Pastor Adebola was going to be speaking. And if he had told me all of that, perhaps I would have prepared myself a little better. But the only reason why I'll forgive him, because I was going to wait for him outside, is because I've also learned quite a lot, and as I'm sure most of you have. The company I work for used to be called Nine Mobile. We are now called T2 Mobile. And I'm the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer for T2 Mobile. Prior to joining T2 Mobile, and I'll explain why I need to tell you a little bit about my background, and that story would tell you how I have learned so many things during the course of my career that hopefully I'll teach you today to allow you to avoid some of the mistakes that I made that perhaps would have allowed me to achieve what I've achieved today, perhaps a couple of years ago. So I've changed roles so many times. I used to be in consulting. In fact, I started my career as a consultant. There are a couple of big companies today that I thankfully wrote the business plan for during my consulting years. And then, for some strange reason, I found myself in law enforcement. So I was a law enforcement officer for almost 3 years. Before I joined InterSwitch, initially heading fraud. Then I transitioned into information and cybersecurity. Then I transitioned into product management. And just before I left InterSwitch, I went into business development before I found what I now think is my calling. Well, not my calling per se, but what I really want to build a career in, which is in digital transformation. And because I've transitioned so many times, what does that tell you? It tells a story about a man who was trying to find his voice or find his purpose. And so I tried so many things, and each time I tried, somehow I felt that this is not really where I want to be. And then I hopped in so many different roles before I eventually found my calling. Hopefully you wouldn't make that mistake, because it took me a lot of time to be able to do that. At the end of this session, we'll speak about a science around determining your purpose. And one of the means to finding your purpose is sharpening your saw, which is what I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to find answers. And my parents and my siblings thought it was very weird, because while they were interested in cartoons, I was more interested in documentaries, and I could watch a documentary for 3 hours nonstop, even as a child. And so my parents wanted me to be either a doctor or a lawyer or one of those professions that are prestigious. But I decided to study something that had to do with how resources that fuel economies are formed. And that's how I found myself in geology. Unfortunately, I never ended up in an oil company or a solid minerals company. But essentially, what I'm going to be talking about during the course of the conversation we're going to be having is really reinforcing what Pastor Adebola has just said, but The approach I will take is to put some logic behind it so that you can see that there's a science, to what she's saying. So it's not just spiritual. It's actually the laws of how the world works, okay? And so one of the things I'll be delving into is to tell you about some of those laws of nature, that one of the most important gifts that God has given to humanity is choice. Please raise up your hands, and I'll come down from the stage so that your attention is not on me, because I really need you to think about what I'm saying. By the way, there are two things people have told me constantly. The first is that I need to consider becoming a pastor. And having listened to Pastor Adebola's session, I think I really need to consider it. The second thing is that I look like Sanusi. If I'd worn my Hausa cap, it would have sunk in. So is there anybody in this room that does not believe that one of the most important gifts that God has given to us is choice? Anyone? If you believe that one of the most important gifts that God has given to us is choice, does that then mean that wherever you are today, whether it is an unfulfilled dream or an unfulfilled vision, or you are unhappy with where you're working, or you're unhappy with anything, is not because of anything else external. It's because of your choice. If you do not believe that, please use your headphones, because anything else I say would not matter to you. I can tell you that wherever you are today, is not because of Nigeria. It's not because of the economy. It's not because of your bad boss or your wicked boss. It's not because of a wicked friend. It is because of the choice that you have either made or not made. True? Okay. Now, the third principle that we all must agree on is that you cannot reap what you did not sow. Is there anybody else in this room that does not believe that you can reap where you did not sow? If you believe that you can reap where you did not sow, I'd advise you to please stand up and walk out, because you must be doing something that is unethical. Right. The fourth thing that you do not necessarily have to believe, but that I believe, and I'm not going to try and convince you to believe otherwise. Like I said, I'm a very logical person. And I'll tell you why I believe that. I'm telling you just to get you to understand how I've come to that conclusion. And for me, it is one thing that has changed my life. I believe that God lives in me. Let me say that again. I believe that God lives in me. Sometimes when we go to church, we interpret the sermon we hear from the pastor, and maybe the pastor tells you that God is somewhere else. Okay? But there are certain things that I've discovered. There are certain books that I've read. And when I sat down and analyzed it, like I said, I'm a very logical person. I have come to the conclusion that God lives in me. And let me tell you why. Recently, I listened to a podcast, again, that changed my life. And that podcast said, at any particular point in time, who you are or what you are able to achieve is a factor of two things: your friends and what you read and consume. It used to be what you read, but because what you read is now digital, the information you consume from digital channels eventually forms who you are. And as I started to read, I had read books written by pagans. I had read books written by people who have never opened a chapter in the Bible. I've read books written by Muslims who perhaps throughout their spiritual journey only interacted with the Quran. I've never compared the Quran to the Bible. But what I can see, and more importantly, I have followed people who have taught me insights about how to improve my health. And do you know one thing that resonates across all of the insights I've gotten from all this literature and everything I've read, is that you can draw an inference from what they're saying to something that is in the Bible. What that tells me is that the Bible wasn't written during the digital era, but there are so many things I've read, again, by people who have never opened the Bible, that have turned out to be true and has shaped the way people become successful and companies become successful. But I can always draw an inference to the Bible. Why is that? What that tells me, and this is my interpretation, you don't have to believe, is that they are not Christians. They have never opened a single page in the Bible, but God is speaking through them. And when I sat down one day and I said, if I can draw that conclusion, that God is speaking to people who are not Christians, who have never opened the Bible, it means that God is in me. Therefore, I can become great if only I can unlock the insights that will make God shine through me. Am I communicating? So, that being said, the message here is that every single human being is born with the opportunity to become great. The difference between the people that become great and the people that do not is that the people that became great found the code. They broke the code. They got the insights that allowed them to unlock the value that God has put in them. Are we together? What I've just said would form the foundation of everything that we're going to be talking about today. So, let's come back to the topic that I was asked to speak on, which is sharpening your sword. And let's look at the concept of sharpening your sword through an analogy in the next video that we're going to watch. If I can get you to move to the next slide and play the video. If it doesn't play, no problem. I'll tell you what exactly happened in the video. So I just wanted us to align on these key principles. And a third, I don't want to call it principle because it's something I believe, which is that God believes in you. Please go ahead and play the video. So while we're waiting for the video to play, this is an analogy of a fiction about two lumberjacks. Lumberjacks are people that cut down trees for a living. And one of the lumberjacks was a very young man, and the other lumberjack was an older man, much older than the younger guy. And as with most younger people, he was more confident that he was going to win a competition with which two of them were participants. And the competition had to do with giving a prize to whoever was able to cut down the most trees in the forest. And so what they did was, again, this is just fiction, but it's meant to convey a message. What this story says is that there was a part of the forest that was divided into two. Half of that forest was given to the younger guy, and the other half was given to the older lumberjack. And they were all given the exact same amount of time to cut down trees. And the criteria for whoever it was that would become the winner was whoever cut down the most number of trees. And so what the video said was that the younger guy, full of confidence, went into his part of the forest and started chopping down trees. But he was also listening to what the other guy was doing in the other part of the forest. What he heard was the sound of axes chopping down the tree. That sound stopped for 1 hour every single time and then started again. And the young man's interpretation, based on what he had heard, was that this guy is so old, he doesn't have the kind of stamina I have. And so I'm chopping down trees nonstop because I'm young, I'm agile, I have energy. This man is old, he's got no chance against me. And so at the end of the period when they were given, they both went to the podium where the winner was going to be announced. And to his greatest surprise, the winner was the older guy, as you'd imagine. And he was in disbelief. And just like any inquisitive person, he wanted to understand why, because it didn't make any sense to him. Perhaps it's like me, where I have to find logic to explain something that has happened. And then what then happened was he had the chance to speak to the older guy. And he said, how? Did you cheat? Do the people who decided who become the winner, are they related to you? What did you do? And he looked at the guy and smiled and said, why do you ask these questions? And the younger guy said, well, I was listening to you while you were chopping down trees. Every 1 hour, you took a break. And I stopped hearing that sound of axes chopping down trees. How is it that you are able to chop down more trees than me? And what the older guy said to him surprised him. He said, every single time that I stopped to chop down my side of the forest, I was sharpening my axe. And so what does that mean when I try to translate that to the purpose why you're here? And I believe that some of you are here to either find your purpose, or you have found your purpose, but you're trying to find structure as to how to achieve that purpose. Again, some of you may fall into a different type of category, but I believe all of you are here because you're trying to achieve a goal. And what this analogy is saying is that in order to achieve your goals, you must always make sure you stop and you sharpen your axe. So what does that mean? What does that translate to in terms of the science behind it? Let's go to the next slide. For those of you who haven't read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, sharpening your axe is a concept that Stephen Covey had used to describe what you must do in order to get you closer to your goal in life, or get you closer to your purpose. Or what he said in The 8th Habit, which was a follow-up book to The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He calls it finding your voice. And he says, every single, and I don't know if he's a Christian,
Once
but almost
upon a time,
everything he said
it was
in
the
his
annual
book
lumberjack
actually ties
competition.
in the Bible. And
After
you'll see
all the
what that looks
competition,
like in a second.
the final was between an
There's
older,
no need to play the video
experienced
anymore.
lumberjack and
I've
the
already
younger,
explained what happened in the
stronger
video.
lumberjack.
Now,
The rule of the competition was quite
sharpening
simple.
your axe is one of the habits that Stephen Covey described in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, he released the 8th habit because the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is pretty old. And what he had said is that the world has changed so much that he needed to add an 8th habit. So for those of you who have read the book before, you would understand what I'm saying. And the purpose of the 8th habit is to teach you to, not just you finding your voice, but getting you to also understand that your purpose is also helping others to find their voice. Finding your voice really means purpose, finding your purpose. And as you're listening to me speak, you are starting to hear that I'm just reinforcing a lot of the things that Pastor Debola had said. So, what does it mean to find your purpose or find your voice? If you go to the next slide, it speaks about a concept called the whole human paradigm. Next slide. But next slide, just click OK. What does it mean to find your voice or find your purpose? What Stephen Covey said is that there are 4 aspects of your life that you must fulfill for you to be considered to have lived a fulfilled life. Stay with me. The first is the mind. The second is the body. The third is the heart. And the fourth, which he calls the intersection of the other 3, is your soul. And again, in some part of the Bible, you would find something that connects with each of the 4 paradigms. You would find something that connects with how to be fulfilled in the mind, how to be fulfilled with the body, how to be fulfilled with the heart, and how to be fulfilled with the soul. What Stephen Covey has just done is he has said it in a non-biblical way, but in a more scientific and logical way. Now, for you to be considered to be effective, or, in other words, for you to be able to efficiently get from where you are today to where you want to be, you must fulfill all 4 aspects of your life, and they are all connected. I dare say today, because I am a living testimony of the progress that I am now starting to make. Like I told you, there were certain mistakes I made in life, and there was a conversation I was having with somebody sitting in a room recently where I spoke about a stage in my life where I experienced stagnation. And I experienced stagnation because I had a false impression of the laws of the world and how the world works. And let me be specific. You see the body, you see the mind, you see the heart, and the intersection of all 3 is the soul. Let me tell you how Covey explained all 3 of them. Forget about the text on the right-hand side of the screen. What he said is that for you to be considered to be a highly effective person who is very efficient in achieving your goals, you must take care of your body, what you eat, and how you exercise. And that has a profound impact on your efficiency in your workplace. Whether you're working for an organization, whether you're an entrepreneur building a business, or whether you're trying to achieve anything, what you do with the body actually determines how efficient you're going to be. If you don't believe what I'm saying, just try it for 1 month. Change your diet, change your routine in terms of exercise, and watch how different you become in the workplace, or how different you become as a founder or a CEO or whatever your position is. The second thing he says is the mind, which we almost always focus on, which is the hunger to develop yourself, the hunger to learn. So most of us here believe that the only way we can make progress in our workplace, or the only place we can make progress in whatever it is we do, is to continuously develop ourselves. A very important and valid factor that you must achieve. You must always learn, you must always develop yourself. The problem is that most times we neglect these three and we focus on this, which is the need to learn. The other part, which is the heart, which actually is the relationships you keep. You heard, again, you guys had reiterated what Pastor Debola had said about the relationships you keep. And the relationships include 2 categories: your personal relationships and the professional relationships you have. These relationships may open doors for you, but like I said, if you neglect the other 3, the doors will not open. Many people have the false impression that having the right connections will always open the door for you. That's actually not true. You have to focus on several other things for that door to open. Now, the fourth and most important thing is the soul or the spirit. And therein lies your purpose in life. And what is the spirit? The spirit is the need to leave a legacy. What are people going to say about you when you leave this world? What legacy are you going to leave behind? And for people that are corrupt, people that are, stealing money in government, what they've done is they've neglected this third part. Stephen Covey calls it the conscience. But again, when you decide that this is your purpose, which is your future state, which is the vision of where you want to be in the future, it is actually the legacy that you plan to leave behind. That's exactly what it is. I'll explain it in a different way by the time I'm done. But I am going to use the flip chart in a second, and I'm going to try and relate it with something that happened to me and how my life changed. So let's go to the next slide. Again, I'll share these slides, and you can look at them in your free time. And I would like to end by recommending what your call to action would be. So what should you do going forward to be able to get you from where you are to where you want to be? And the distance between your current state and your future state actually is sharpening your sword. Okay? Are we together? Okay. Now, what should be the call to action? The question is, which one of the 4 paradigms are you going to sharpen first? So, I'll get to in fact, go back to the previous slide. Something I forgot to mention that is really important before I get to this side is that most times when we say sharpening your saw, we think about an external tool that helps you to achieve a goal, right? The truth of the matter is that you have 4 saws, 4 of them. One is your mind, one is your body, the other is your heart, and the third is your soul. So when you think about sharpening your saw, you must think about your saw in those 4 dimensions. And the question I try to ask in the next slide is, which of those 4 dimensions should you sharpen first? Now, if you haven't already figured out what I'm trying to say from the beginning, is that if you want your life to change, the first thing you must do is change your mentality and the way you think. Are we together? And let me say that again. The first thing you must do is change the way you think and your mentality. And if you remember, one of the foundational principles I said in my very first slide is that everything you do today or wherever you are is by choice. Your choice and no other person's choice. It is not because you are not born with a silver spoon. I don't care if you were born with a silver spoon, black spoon, wooden spoon. Everybody was born with an equal opportunity as far as I'm concerned. The difference between those who succeed and those who end up in the middle of the bucket or at the bottom of the pyramid is that those who succeed had unlocked the code. Perhaps they were told the code by their parents. Perhaps they were shown the code by somebody else or some interaction that they had. But the most important thing is, for you to become successful, you must be able to achieve success in all those 4 paradigms. So let's go back to the last slide. Which of the saws are you going to sharpen first? Are you going to sharpen your mind? If you haven't changed your mindset, perhaps that's the first place to start. If you've changed your mindset, then perhaps you need to pick which one of those that you need to sharpen first. But here's what I'm going to try and say. And let me start with a story. True story that happened to me recently. When I was being interviewed for my current role, and let me start by saying I've worked in 1, 2, 3, 4. I've worked in 4 organizations in my entire career. In the entire 22 years that I've worked so far, I've only worked in 4 organizations. And in all of those organizations, I never applied for those jobs. Every other job that I applied for, I did not get. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. So, I don't know if everybody can see. Let's say this is your current state. Let's say this is your desired state. So this is your current. This is your desired. The question people always ask is, how do I get from here to here? In some cases, you have a vision of what this is, or you think you do. But let me tell you something, and I'll relate it to what happened to me in the interview process that I had when I took my current job. So, my family lives in Canada, so every now and then I have to travel to Canada to go and spend some time with them. And while I was there in September last year, a gentleman from one of the big 4 consulting firms reached out to me and said, we are hiring for a client who operates in the telco sector who are in need of people with your skills. Are you interested? And I said, who is this telco? And they said, you have to sign an NDA first. I said, okay, no problem. So I signed the NDA, and they told me that this company was 9Mobile. The interview was scheduled, and because I was living in a different time zone, and at that time I was in a different country, it couldn't be a physical interview. And so I pleaded that the interview should be scheduled at a time when I'll be awake, because I didn't want to be awake at 3 a.m. if the interview was scheduled in the morning. So I pleaded that he should schedule the interview for an afternoon time when I'll be awake in Canada, okay? Of course, because I was being recruited into an executive management role, I was supposed to prepare a presentation based on a problem case study, right? And I was going to appear before a panel. So I was asked to submit my presentation, and this is a true story, at least a week before the date of the interview. And I actually forgot about the interview, because at the time, my wife was saying, you have to move to Canada. So my going to Canada at that time was to prepare for me moving finally from Nigeria. And so a night before the interview, an email had come through a couple of days earlier that I did not see from the consultant saying, you have not sent your presentation. And I panicked and I rushed, and out of all of the things I'd learned, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this story. Out of all of the things I'd learned, I quickly put together something, and to be honest, I wasn't really serious about getting that job because I was already planning to move to Canada. I put together a presentation that night, I sent it, and the presentation was at 2 p.m. Nigerian time, 8 a.m. Canadian time. And when I logged into the Zoom session, I saw the CEO, I saw 2 members of the board, I saw a senior partner from one of the consulting firms that was recruiting, and I saw a gentleman that I haven't seen since that day. And the consultant then said, don't worry about telling us about yourself. I'll read your profile to the panel, and then you just go straight into your presentation. And he read my profile. I went straight into the presentation. I was given 15 minutes. I finished, and there were only 2 questions from the CEO and one from one of the members of the board. and 2 other people did not speak. And so I was waiting for more questions, because in my heart, if I did the presentation very well, there should be more questions. Not so, but there were no other questions. And they just said, "Thank you for your time," and they ended the call. And my wife asked me, "How did it go?" And I said, "I think it went horrible." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I only got 2 questions, and the interview ended as soon as it started." I said, "Okay, no problem." But the next day, the consultant said, "Can I share your number with the CEO? He wants to ask you something." And I said, "No problem. He's the one hiring. Let him call me." And he said to me, "That presentation you did, who gave it to you?" And I said, "Nobody gave it to me. That I made it myself." He now said, "Okay, I'll get back to you." 2 days later, that member of the board called me and asked me the same question. He said, "That presentation, who gave it to you?" And I said, "The CEO called me and asked me the same question. Is there something I should know?" Because I was getting worried. And he said, "When are you coming to Nigeria?" And I said, "In 2 weeks." And he said, "I want to meet you physically." And the day I came to Nigeria, this next day, I had a meeting with him. And he opened the presentation and said, "This is the presentation that we use to convince the investor to buy 9Mobile." And I kid you not, it was almost exactly as mine. Even I was shocked. The only difference was the formatting and the color of the slides. And so when I looked at him, I looked at the presentation, I looked at him in disbelief. And he said, "Now you understand why we're asking you that question." And then he started asking me more questions. He wanted to understand my thought process behind. He still didn't believe. He was convinced somebody had leaked that presentation to me. And so he said, "How did you come up with all of the things you put in your slides?" And when I started explaining to him how I got all of those insights, he then said, "We not only want to hire you now for the CDIO position, but we want you to sit on the board of one of the banks that we also own." So, when you are setting, again, it brings me back to my diagram. When you are setting your goal, there is a wrong way to view how your goal should be set. And let me explain what it means. I follow a gentleman who speaks about wealth. And there was something he said to me that changed my perception completely. There was something I was doing. I actually didn't know I was doing it, but it turned out to be the right approach. When you are setting your goal of where you want to be, you can set the goal of, "I want to be a CEO." You can set the goal of, "I want to be wealthy." But what this man said in his wealth management training is, if you set a target where you are the one chasing that target, you will never achieve it. Let me say that again. If your target is one that you are chasing to achieve, you will never achieve it. It will always elude you. Do you know what your target should be? Your target should be to become the person that attracts that goal that you want to achieve. So if you want to be wealthy, if you chase wealth, wealth will elude you. If you build yourself to have the profile and the characteristics of somebody that is wealthy, money will come to you. Wealth will come to you. And so I'm going to put a human being here rather than a ball and tell you today that if you had set a target based on what you want to achieve and your goal is to try and achieve that thing, you would most likely not achieve it. What you should be doing is becoming the person that fits the profile. So if you want to become a CEO, you should be building yourself to have the characteristics of a CEO. And I guarantee you, a CEO job will come to you. If you are if your vision is to become something, become what attracts that thing, and that thing will come to you. If you try and chase it, you will never achieve it. Do you know why? Because there are certain traits, there are certain characteristics that you must build for you to last in that position. And even if you are given that position, you are going to be found out that you are not fit for that position and you'll be asked to leave. Are we together? So, when I said you cannot reap where you did not sow, that was actually what I meant. The only way you can reap something is to sow all of the things that turns you to become that person that fits that profile, so that that thing will, the law of nature is that it is a law of attraction. become something, and that thing will come to you. So, that being said, the next question is, and the reason why I spent some time describing that, is that I needed you all to understand what lens you should be looking at when you are looking for your desired state or your vision of who you want to be in the future. 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. The next question is, how do you get there? Which brings me to something that I hear people say all the time. As far as I'm concerned, two of the most misinterpreted words in the Bible is grace and God's time. And let me say that again. Two of the most misinterpreted things in the Bible is grace and God's time. One, people interpret grace, maybe by the way it has been described, to be something that you sit down and manna will fall from heaven and land on your laps. It will never happen. Now, if it does happen, it doesn't mean that the laws of nature has changed. It just means that you unknowingly became that person and you attracted that thing. That was what happened to me. I made a decision when I was working in InterSwitch towards the end of my career to build a career in digital transformation and focus on a specific sector without knowing that that was where I was going to end up where I am today. And when I became that person, because I invested in that master's, I invested in all of the personal development things that, got me to where I am, and that attracted the job that I have today. And that was a big lesson that I would like you guys to take away from here. If you don't take away anything, take away this. Do not try and chase something. Become the profile and have the qualities of people that typically have achieved those things, and that thing will come to you. Are we together? So the next question is, how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? If you are an entitled person, this message is not for you. Do you know what an entitled person means? It means you feel like somebody else owes you something. Whether that somebody else is your organization, whether that somebody else are your parents, whether that somebody else is your friend, nobody owes you anything. Again, brings me back to choice. You are where you are, not because of anybody else but yourself. So you see where I'm connecting all of these things with the foundational principles that I've spoken before. Your choice is what will get you to where you want to be. But this thing is not going to fall from heaven. And let me let you in on an insight if you don't already know it. What successful people don't tell you is the journey that took them to success. They don't tell you about what they did to get them there. They have a very shortened, sweet story on how they became successful. And success may not necessarily be very wealthy. When I say success, I'm actually saying unlocking God in you. Everybody has a purpose in this world. You're going to be waiting for it to come from heaven, but you have to discover it yourself. And how do you do that? Again, we've spoken about being the person who attracts whatever it is you want to be. But here's the thing. For you to get to this place, it is not a big bang. You will not wake up one morning and become a CEO. You will not wake up one morning and become a chief. You will not wake up one morning and become wealthy. The difference is that you must take small steps, tiny steps, to take you there. There is no shortcut, I can guarantee you that. There is no shortcut to achieving your goals. You must take tiny steps, and it is the accumulation of all those steps that eventually brings out the greatness in you. Are we together? So how do you take those small steps? As I end, let me tell you about something that I've started that has started to yield results. If you are looking to lose weight or you are looking to have a particular physique, let's speak about the body, one of the 4 paradigms that we spoke about earlier. Most times, most people quit because the first 2 weeks, you don't see physical results. But there's something happening on the inside that you don't see. And if you stick to that routine, if you stick to that thing that you're doing, that you are sure is going to get you to that physique that you're looking for, eventually the results will come. What does that tell you? And I dare say, when I tell you that all 4 paradigms are connected, for you to get from here to here, you must define a routine. And more importantly, you must be disciplined to stick that to routine. And that routine happens every single day. Every single day. And Simon Sinek, who is a gentleman I respect and follow all the time, said something. He said, for you to win in life, or for you to unlock God's potential in you, or for you to be great, you must win your morning. If you win your morning, you win your day. If you win your day, you win your week. If you win your week, you win your year. If you win your year, you become successful. And the only way you can win your year is to win your morning. And let me tell you why. The most sacred part of your body, and the part of your body that you must protect what goes in and what goes out, is your mind. Again, remember I said the first thing that must change is your mind. The only way you can change your mind is to guard the entry into your mind. You need to guard what goes in and guard what goes out. And the easiest way, and let me tell you one thing about the mind that is very funny. If you don't fill your mind with all of the things that will take you to that destination, the world will fill it for you. So if you consume unuseful social media content, what you are doing is filling your mind. If you read content that does not take you closer to your goal, that content will fill your mind. And what it is doing, it is taking up space. And once it takes up space, the things that you need to put in your mind to take you closer to your goal will not find any space. Are we together? So your routine, if there's anything you take out of this session, your routine that helps you win your day is your morning. What do you do in the morning? And what you do in the morning is to fill your mind with things, with the fuel that will take you to your destination. Are we together? I'm not saying don't go to social media. I'm saying don't do it in the morning. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying fill your mind with all of the insights and information that takes you from point A to point B, so that anything else you consume will not find space if it is not useful in taking you to your destination. Are we together? So social media is, and I'm very careful when I say this, social media can be good, but it can also be very dangerous. The algorithms in social media have been designed to give you very short bursts of dopamine and make you feel like what you are watching is satisfying you. But it is useless in most cases. And what I'm saying in essence is that you must be very intentional, especially with what you consume in the morning. So let me end by saying this. What will take you from point A to point B, if you haven't already understood what I've just described, is discipline. And many people feel describe discipline to be something that cages you. It is actually the complete opposite. When you are disciplined about what you do in the morning, it frees you up from being a slave to other things outside your goal. Are we together? Discipline is actually what frees you, not what cages you. Discipline is saying, I have a routine. I have a process. Why do you think organizations, as they become bigger, implement processes? Do you think they're stupid? So when an organization starts as a startup, you typically run without processes. As you become bigger, for you to get to the next level, you must have processes, you must have systems. As an individual, the same thing applies to you. When you are younger, you can do anything you want. But as you get older, and as you now need to achieve goals, you now need to institutionalize processes. Processes that feed your body, processes that feed your mind, processes that feed your heart, and processes that feed your soul. Because the difference between here and here, what will take you from this point to this point, is the discipline that you implement every single day. But discipline alone is not enough. You need systems, you need processes. Pastor Debola spoke about having things in your calendar. That is a process. That is a system that ensures that discipline stays. And the reason why that is important is that our mood changes every day. There are times you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like doing anything. There are times you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like exercising. You don't feel like reading. But it's those systems that will remind you that, Oga, the world does not care about how you feel today. If you do not care for yourself, the world will not care for you. And I keep saying it again. Everywhere you are is a choice. You're seeing where it's connected now. It is what makes you a successful person or not are the choices you make every single day every single morning, but because discipline is not enough, because sometimes discipline can be impacted by your mood, you need to ensure that you have systems. The other thing that you need, and this is very important, is passion. But the question is, what is passion? Some of you feel passion, but you can't really describe it. But I've read about passion, and one of the things I found in terms of the science that describe passion is that passion is the intersection between a need and your talent. Once there is a need, and once you have the talent to fulfill that need, you have found your passion. And your passion should also guide where you want to be in terms of your vision. So, I did not say skills, I said talent. Now, when you speak about God-given gifts, everybody has a different gift here. But you need to discover what your gift is. And you need to discover what need that gift can help solve. And therein lies your passion. So, to summarize, when you are creating your vision or your desired state, do not try and create a target that you are pursuing. Try to become the profile of that person that fits this target. And this thing will come to you. The second thing is, as you look to get from where you are to where you want to be, the only way you can get there is what you do every single day. And it is the combination of all of those things that will eventually turn you to become that person. And what you do every day is governed by discipline, and it is fueled by both passion and systems that you have. With that being said, I thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll open it up to questions.